Back when Kia announced that it was working on a rear-wheel drive vehicle based on its premium vehicle platform that the Hyundai Kia group uses for its rear-wheel drive Genesis models, I couldn't help but be excited. The resulting vehicle isn't really all that Korean, to be honest, because it was designed and engineered in Germany by Germans. The man behind this car's excellent design is Peter Schreier, whom you might know from Audi. He's famous for several models, but it seems that the Audi TT is the model many people know him by. So Peter Schreier penned a very sexy looking big fastback, and then the mechanicals were handled by Albert Biermann, who used to run BMW's M division in the early 2000s. The E46 M3, which is widely regarded as one of the best M cars ever, is the work of Albert Biermann. The resulting model is called the Stinger, and it is totally unlike other Kias. But before we get into how it drives, let's talk about the way this car looks. In terms of its body style, it's a liftback, hatchback, fastback, whatever you want to call it. A big one, like a Porsche Panamera or the BMW 6 Series GT, although the 6 Series GT is a slightly taller vehicle as well. Some compare this to the BMW 4 Series, but that's technically more of a four-door coupe, even though that too is a hatchback. I also think there's some Porsche Panamera, especially in the rear three-quarter view of this vehicle. So my tester that I'm driving today is the top-of-the-line GT model with the facelift. The facelift changes the headlights up front, some of the trim materials, and in the rear, you finally get a full-width light bar. Kia also gave this vehicle new wheel designs like the 19s that are on this tester. I think they are some of the prettiest wheels I've ever seen on any car. They are tremendous with their dual spoke design. They are wonderful. They are also staggered. They're 225s up front and 245s in the rear. This car is also on winter tires, so when we get to the quick driving bit on this amazing stretch of road, I'm going to moan about the tires letting go before you would want them to, but then again, it's like 4 degrees Celsius outside, so winter tires are a necessity. Kia has also kept the reflector thing that runs from the rear light clusters onto the side of the vehicle. Some people don't like that design detail, but frankly, I do not mind it. So the rear light clusters are much better looking than before. They now have a proper light bar. The light bar that you know this car was supposed to have, but then they probably just waited for the facelift. The quad exhausts are still real. They are real right up to the tips, which are integrated in the bumper, and granted they are metallic, and they are real. Let's just call them real, especially since the standards for what we call real exhaust these days have gone down drastically. Some people criticize the Stinger for the fact that the area just above the rear wheel, it doesn't look very good. They say there's too much metal there. Basically kind of the same arguments like the ones presented by people who did not like the first generation Porsche Panamera. Although this is better looking than that. It's still a great looking car overall. I absolutely love it to bits. I think it's a very special looking thing. Its context and its history is unique, being designed and engineered by Germans with a Korean twist for a global market. And Kia itself knows this car is special. It is not going to follow it up with another vehicle, and so there won't be a second generation Stinger, sadly. It holds the Kia beacon high, showing we can do this. We can make a sporty, rear-wheel drive performance vehicle almost as good as the Germans. Because it's not quite there, and I'll explain later on in the video why. Moving to the interior of the vehicle, I'm struggling to spot any changes. over the pre-facelift model. I'm pretty sure they changed this plastic texture and the finish of this plastic here on the steering wheel. I'm looking around. The infotainment is Kia's latest one, like you would find in any other Kia. And just like before, it grants you the option to customize very many settings. You can turn off, for instance, the augmented sound through the speakers, which I did. Although it doesn't seem to save settings, so you, when you stop and start the vehicle again, you will have to go into the same menus and do the same things. The steering wheel appears unchanged. It's just as good as before. It's a very sporty looking wheel, and it also feels sporty with its flat bottom. The grip parts are covered in some perforated leather to give you extra grip and sporty feeling. The interior itself is of surprisingly high quality for a Kia, even though, to be fair, modern Kias, even cheaper ones, are still really good inside in terms of fit and finish and materials quality. So the design of the interior is different to other Kias. It's quite clear that this car's German designers were inspired by German vehicles, because these three circular vents here are Mercedes inspired, as is the door handle. The buttons for the seat memory function are in the same place where you would find them in a Mercedes. The selector for the transmission is Audi-esque. The speaker grills for the optional Harman Kardon sound system. In fact, it's not optional anymore. I think it's standard on the Stinger, because the manufacturer removed many options for its final model years. So you can't get the Stinger with any of the other two engines, the 2-liter gas engine and the 2.2 diesel. Those are no longer available. This vehicle measures 4.8 meters in length, making it quite a big car. And when you sit in the back as a passenger, you have very, very good levels of knee room and shoulder room, especially when there are only two passengers in the rear. However, if I were any taller than 183 centimeters or 6 foot tall, I probably wouldn't really fit in the back for headroom. The trunk is a useful shape, and since this is a hatchback, you can put quite big objects in there, but it's just over 400 liters, so its capacity is quite limited. What's nice about this vehicle is that it doesn't really have that many options that you can select. So my tester costs just over 52,000 euros, and it has some of the very few options that you can spec. So the leather is standard. The electric seats with memory function and active side bolsters are also standard. Well, the side bolsters are active just for the driver. Even the black suede headliner is standard. And the only things you can pay extra for are the sunroof, which is pretty big and it opens. And you can drive the vehicle at speed with it open, and it doesn't create a lot of buffeting. So that's pretty good. And I think some of the safety features might be optional as well. But basically, this vehicle comes fully equipped. So this has just under 3,000 euros worth of options, and I'm pretty sure it's just the sunroof and the color. And the color is called, is it deep chrome blue or micro blue? I'm pretty sure it's deep chrome blue, which is like a metallic indigo tinted shade of blue. It's very, very nice. As a car to cruise in, it's comfortable. The suspension with adaptive dampers, when you put it in comfort mode, is very cosseting, even on the 19-inch wheels. It's a pretty good grand tourer. However, when you reach a twisty stretch of road, you can unleash the 3.3-liter V6 engine, which gets 2 turbochargers and makes 366 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, and its peak torque of 510 Newton meters is delivered flat from a very, very low RPM, 1,300 RPM, all the way to 4,500 RPM. Power is sent to the rear wheels through Kia's own 8-speed automatic gearbox, which is pretty good, but it's not perfect, as I'll explain soon. My tester has all-wheel drive, which is the only way you can get the Stinger nowadays in Romania and in many markets. Although in other markets you can only get it with rear-wheel drive. But this vehicle doesn't really feel all-wheel drive. And that's because when you put it in sport, it limits the amount of torque that it can send to the front axle to 20%, so it sends 80% to the rear. Otherwise, in eco or comfort mode, it limits torque being sent to the front wheels to 40%. I threw this car into a few corners, and to be honest, it doesn't really feel like it's sending any power to the front axle. Sure, it does want to push wide, but I think that might have something to do with the fact that it's on winter tires, even if they are performance winter tires. Although, to be fair, the all-wheel drive system might play a role in that too. But generally, this vehicle feels sporty and rear-driven, even with the all-wheel drive system. So rear-wheel drive examples weigh around 1.8 tons, while if you opt for all-wheel drive, that goes to nearly 1.9 tons, or just above 1.9 tons, depending on how you spec your vehicle. The manufacturer claims that the Stinger can sprint to 100 kilometers per hour in 5.4 seconds and top out at 270 kilometers per hour. That's a lot for a Kia. Kia also quotes this engine as being able to return just 10.9 liters on the WLTP test cycle, on the mixed cycle. But realistically, the way I've been driving it, it's double that. You may be able to get it lower if you drive it sensibly in the smart or the eco mode. The smart mode, by the way, is kind of similar to BMW's adaptive mode. When you put the car in sport, the seat bolsters tighten around you, the suspension firms up, and the steering becomes more, well, it's heavier. And even though this vehicle weighs 1.9 tons, it can not only get out of its own way thanks to the excellent power and torque levels that it has. This is actually surprisingly good. It's not quite a BMW in the sense that the steering is not set up for the utmost sharpness, which makes some BMWs feel a bit nervous, I guess. But at the same time, it's not dead either. It's surprisingly good. And even though it weighs as much as it does, nearly 2 tons, it doesn't feel that big, especially when you stiffen up the suspension. Let me just put it in Sport Plus real quick. So this disables traction control, not ESP, so stability is still on. You can use the paddles, although the vehicle will shift up like a Mercedes when you reach higher revs. But you can still play with it, and once you learn when it shifts up, you either let it or shift up just before it does in order to feel like you're in control. The engine is really, really strong, to be honest. This 3.3 twin turbo that's actually placed behind the front axle in the vehicle. So it's front mid-engine car, this, and you can feel it. The front end is pointy. It goes where you want it to go. The car just grips, even on these Continental winter tires. It has no problem staying glued to the road. Although you can make it dance, you can wiggle the back end if you want. But that's when the vehicle starts to show its weight. But to be perfectly honest, this does feel like a BMW, a well-sorted BMW. It doesn't quite feel like an M car. I actually drove the M4 on this very road. You can check that video out. Please do. Nice downshift. It blipped the throttle when it gave me the lower gear. Nice set of bends here. It's very, very planted, this. It's a very, very good performance car. A real enthusiast pleaser. I'm having fun in a rear-wheel drive Kia on a twisty mountain road. There's gotta be something, right? And it wants to rotate around you. Even though the wheelbase itself is quite big, I think it's almost 2.9 meters. So it's a big car, but it feels smaller. And this is a trick that all good performance cars pull. That they feel smaller and more nimble. Probably the best thing about the Stinger is that when you take it out of Sport Plus and just cruise around in it, it feels like a very believable luxury car. The seats are comfortable. I found them surprisingly comfortable, above average even for comparable premium-esque luxury cars. They are as comfortable as any BMW 3 or 4 Series seats, to be honest, even on longer journeys. The driver's seat has an extending electric thigh support that makes journeys even more comfortable. The tech on offer is also very good. It has cameras in all sorts of places. The infotainment is also competent, although for me I would have preferred some sort of physical controls because the screen feels just a bit too far. I have to reach for it. And it's not a very safe thing to do when you're driving, to be honest. But it's a minor niggle, and the infotainment itself is very good, and you can control some stuff through the steering wheel, some functions, so you don't have to take your hands off the wheel and your eyes off the road to do it. It has pleasant mood lighting. The build quality is surprisingly good. I can't help but remember Matt Watson's car wall review when the Stinger first came out. He was moving this center console from side to side, and I tried replicating that, and it's still just as solid as I thought it was when I tested the pre-facelift model. This feels very solid, if not more so, to be honest. It's an unusual sight on the road. People stop and stare because it's not a very common car. And I can't help but think that if this was a BMW and it had a BMW badge, it'd probably be $75,000. But since it wears a Korean manufacturer's badge, it's more reasonably priced and more honest. It's not quite perfect though. For instance, the transmission, which is not the ZF 8-speed, it is Kia's own 8-speed automatic transmission. When you shift it from reverse into drive or from drive into reverse, there's like a judder that goes through the car sometimes. It's not present every time. And another thing, that even when you're in sport mode, the vehicle sometimes feels reluctant to kick down and give you access to more power via a lower gear. This becomes especially apparent in comfort or eco modes. Then it really doesn't want to shift down. And from what I understand, the transmission has special tuning for the European market, where our emissions regulations are very stringent, and it is dulled down compared to other markets where it's sold like it's a Korean domestic market or in Asia or the US. And whenever you drive this car in a spirited fashion, and this happened in the diesel car that I tested 3-4-5 years ago, I can't remember how long it was, I got the same error message that the transmission had overheated and the vehicle was reducing power to protect it and to allow it to cool. I got this again in this vehicle twice, and you basically have to leave it running. At least that's what I did. You leave it running for a while so that it circulates the transmission oil through the cooler, and you cool it, because as you probably hopefully know, it's not wise to immediately shut off an engine that has been run at high speed or high engine speed. An engine that has been beaten on, you don't immediately shut it off, especially in a turbo car. You let it cool itself down at idle or just cruising around at low revs. And I applied the same principle to the transmission, and whenever I did this and then turned it back on, the error was gone and I could drive the vehicle for a while before it came back on. Or maybe you need an upgraded oil cooler if you really want to drive this car on track, because it can do that. It steers, it stops, and it accelerates brilliantly. Oh yeah, and the brakes, they are Brembos, they have nice red calipers, and they are very, very good. Up front, it has 350 millimeter rotors that are gripped by 4 piston calipers, and they do a tremendous job. Another problem is that it's quite cramped in the rear for taller passengers. Come to think of it, it doesn't really have that many problems. Probably its biggest problem is the badge, but this is not your typical Kia. It is a great car that should be celebrated, and I want one. Although the first thing I'll do, if it's one of these new Stingers that have a particulate filter, I will find a louder aftermarket exhaust. It really needs it and make it louder, because a vehicle this quick and this enjoyable to drive deserves a proper engine soundtrack. And even though V6s don't sound as good as inline 6 engines, an exhaust will still help in this case, definitely. But overall, the Stinger is a very, very unique vehicle. It is thoroughly a recommendable vehicle. It is very, very good value for what you are getting and the type of vehicle you are getting and the company in which this vehicle sits, the premium company. The only non-premium rival for this would be the Volkswagen Arteon, but that's a front-wheel drive biased vehicle. You can't get an engine any bigger than 2 liters, and while it is comparable for performance, especially in the more powerful all-wheel drive versions of that car, it is nowhere near as fun to drive. It's dead to drive compared to this. This is tactile and fun and tossable, even for a big car. It's not really ready to be taken on track days, but with a few minor modifications, I think you can impress and surprise a few people on track with this, and even yourself. This pretty much concludes my review and today's light. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching until the end. Subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you again in the next one, which will hopefully be during daytime. Take care.